Remember when you were a kid and couldn't fall asleep, so you were told to count sheep in your head till you fell asleep? I always thought that was a metaphor for just counting in your sleep. I never knew that people actually imagined sheep and counted them. This difference I had is due to aphantasia. It's the inability to form mental images of real or imaginary places, people, and things. Aphantasia isn't really a mental disorder or a disability, rather a characteristic. To put this into perspective, I'd like you to visualize a ball on a table. Now imagine someone walks up to the table and gives the ball a push. What happens to the ball? Now answer these questions. What color was the ball? What gender was the person that pushed the ball? What did the person look like? What size was the ball? Perhaps marble, tennis ball, basketball, or maybe even something different. What about the table? What shape was it? What was it made of? Now answer me this. Did you already know the answers, or after you were asked them, did you have to select them specifically? In my case, I was able to conceptualize a ball on a table. Like, I knew how it would look, and if I know if a person were to push it, it would roll and fall off the edge. The thing is, I wasn't able to actually visualize it before I was asked those questions. I didn't consider anything related to how the ball looked or felt, or even how the table or the person was. If you're like me, you have hypophantasia. It's one of the areas in the visual imagination spectrum. The order being aphantasia, the inability to visualize mental images; hypophantasia, visual imagery but is very vague, faint, or fuzzy; phantasia, just regular old visual imagery; and lastly, hyperphantasia, being able to vividly visualize in your head from exact color to maybe even smell and sound. Fortunately, only 4% of the population has aphantasia, and to be diagnosed typically, they would have to take a VVIQ test, which stands for Vividness of Visual Imagery Questionnaire, as well as doing an MRI scan of your brain. Technically, it is self-diagnosable as you're the only one who knows how you think, but I would recommend getting it properly diagnosed, as there's usually signs of some type of head trauma that happen when you get diagnosed with aphantasia. I should mention, there is many people who just grew up this way. It's just one of the possibilities of having aphantasia is head trauma. Until a couple of years ago, there wasn't much research done into aphantasia, but the research we have found is very significant. These studies looked at how the hippocampus and the occipital lobe are changed due to the aphantasia and hyperphantasia. In case you're not sure, the hippocampus plays a central role in most cognitive functions and when it comes to memory, as it is the one responsible for short-term memories becoming long-term memories, as well as the retrieval of memories when needed. While the occipital lobe plays a part in processing visual information, including color, form, and motion, as well as playing a key role in helping identify familiar people and objects. During these studies, they did MRI scans and found that the hippocampus, which plays an important role in recalling vivid, detailed autobiographical memories, is actually less activated in aphantasics. Aphantasics being what people with aphantasia are called. The opposite actually is applied to hyperphantasics, as they have a stronger connection to these parts of the brain, leading to more autobiographical memory and better visual imagination. Aphantasics were actually found to have a hard time remembering faces, which would explain why I kept crying when I was younger, because I couldn't remember how my parents looked. Anyway, there was even a connection that showed that hyperphantasics are typically more extroverted while aphantasics are introverted. The concept of being on opposite sides of the spectrum might be foreign for many, as for me, I wouldn't know how people are able to picture things in their head, and I don't believe you would be able to not picture things in your head like me. Therefore, the best way I can describe this to visualize the other side of the spectrum is the comparison between visualizing versus conceptualizing. Visualizing being where you're able to actually form mental images of something, while conceptualizing is more where you take the idea and you break it into smaller parts. Take these two small clips of a window with raindrops as an example. This first clip, you're able to see the raindrops on the window. They aren't vivid like if you were hyperphantasic, but vivid enough to know what it is. While this clip is blurry, but you're able to break it down. You can tell that there are drops of something there on a window or screen. It isn't picture perfect, but if you were to say that they were raindrops on a window, you'd be like, yeah, that's what you can see it as. This is what hypophantasics like me see when we're told to imagine. Aphantasics take it a step further, as you're unable to imagine either of those, but you know that they're there, almost like a sixth sense. If this concept leaves you with more questions, feel free to do research on your own or even ask your own medical provider, as this is just the research that I found. From some people having internal monologues to others not, to now even people not even being able to remember the same way as the person next to them, the brain is truly a fascinating thing that differs from person to person and shows you how much more we have to study the brain in psychology.